Vincent, don't move. One look at the screen froze him. Aria, 3 babies, his babies, and a shadow behind them. Everything he believed was a lie. Someone is hunting his family and time is running out. Watch, because the nightmare has only just begun. Welcome back to Heartwoven Tales. I'm Selena. I'm so glad you're here. Tell me, where are you listening from today? Make sure you watch this story till the very end because it's full of twists and suspense you won't want to miss. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. All right, let's dive in. Vincent Morelli's boots slammed against the marble floor of his office, each step echoing like a warning shot in the cavernous room. His fists clenched so tightly that the veins along his forearms threatened to burst, his knuckles whitening under the pressure. Rage wasn't new to him, but tonight it had taken on a weight heavier than steel, a fire that demanded release. The office lights flickered as he passed, momentarily casting elongated shadows across the walls lined with memories of his empire. Photographs of victories, signed deals, and faces he had either trusted or destroyed. He ignored them all. Nothing mattered except the screen in front of him. He reached the hidden safehouse cameras, the small, dusty console glowing dimly under his touch. His fingers trembled, not with fear, but anticipation, a desperate need to see, to control, to dominate the chaos that had been eating him alive for years. He tapped the first feed. The video clicked and whirred, a soft mechanical groan escaping as if protesting the intrusion into a place meant to remain unseen. Vincent's jaw tightened. He wanted distraction, wanted a fleeting sense of power over something, anything. But fate had other plans. The feed loaded slowly, each passing second dragging like hours. Vincent's chest rose and fell with controlled rage, but his mind refused to stay calm. He muttered under his breath, cursing his own hesitation, the cruel irony of wanting answers yet fearing them. And then, impossibly, there she was, Aria, his Aria, the woman who had vanished a year ago, leaving him convinced she had chosen a life without him, leaving a void in his world that no wealth, no power could fill. She lay curled on a threadbare couch, her form fragile, worn, almost like a ghost he had only dared to dream of. 3 infants pressed against her, their tiny bodies moving in perfect unison with her heartbeat. Vincent froze, every muscle locked. His breath caught in his throat. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. The sight of her, the living proof of everything he thought he had lost, tore through him in a way nothing else could. His eyes shifted to the infants, tiny hands clutching her fingers, heads resting against her chest. And then he saw it, their eyes. Silver gray. His own eyes mirrored back at him in 3 tiny, perfect reflections. He staggered backward from the console, unwilling to believe what his own eyes showed. No, it couldn't be. Every lie he had forced himself to swallow about her betrayal, every rationalization that kept him from grief, shattered like glass beneath the weight of reality. She looked exhausted, terrified, vulnerable in a way that no one had seen since the day she disappeared, like she had fought a war alone, every night, every hour, every painful second. The babies clung to her as if she were the axis of their entire existence, their fragile lives tethered to hers with invisible cords of desperation and need. Vincent's hands shook as he leaned closer to the screen, needing, almost craving, proof that what he was seeing was real, tangible, unavoidable. Then the camera betrayed the scene with a flicker, a sudden movement, a ripple across the video feed. Aria jolted awake, her eyes wide and panicked, scanning the room as if she could sense an intruder. Her breath hitched. The soft cries of the babies mingled with her own quickened inhalations, forming a discordant symphony that pierced Vincent's heart. A dark figure stepped into the frame behind her, moving with calculated purpose, deliberate and silent. Vincent's pulse thundered. A voice, low and threatening, might have been whispering. He couldn't hear it yet, but he imagined it. felt it, as if the camera itself carried the threat into his office. Aria's eyes widened, the panic in them mirrored by Vincent's own disbelief. She scrambled to shield the babies, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the weight of their tiny bodies against her chest. A sudden bang echoed from the hallway on the screen. Not a loud shot, but the kind of noise that made the hair on the back of your neck stand straight. Vincent's hands were frozen mid-air, hovering over the console. He could feel a cold sweat prickling at his temples. The fury that had stormed him through the office moments ago now coexisted with paralyzing fear. Aria's lips parted, forming his name in a whisper, though he couldn't hear it. He could see the unspoken words etched in her panic, pleas for mercy, warnings, unvoiced confessions. The camera angle shifted slightly, capturing the figure more clearly. Tall, imposing, shadows hiding features, every movement precise and predatory. Vincent's gut twisted. He knew instinctively that whoever was behind her was dangerous, capable of ending everything she had survived, everything he had built. Aria shifted, pressing the babies tighter against her chest, rocking them instinctively. Every motion spoke of exhaustion, fear, and a protective love that no one had the right to violate. Her eyes flicked to the hallway again, scanning, calculating, searching for escape in a room that offered none. Vincent's breath caught again. He realized she had been hiding from this threat, alone, for months, a year, possibly longer, and he had been oblivious, chasing his own assumptions, letting his anger blind him. The camera feed flickered once, twice, and then a faint noise, a shuffle, a whisper of movement, suggested the figure was advancing, closing in on her, closing in on the babies. Vincent slammed his fist onto the desk. The sound ricocheted in the room. He wanted to move, to act, but the feed held him captive, revealing a scene he had no way to intervene in from here. The figure's shadow loomed over Aria. One hand reached toward her. Aria stiffened. A low cry escaped one of the babies. She murmured to them in a voice so soft it was almost prayer. Vincent's vision blurred with rage and helplessness. Every instinct screamed at him to tear the screen apart, to transport himself into that room, to save her and the children. Suddenly, she lifted the babies and bolted from the couch, her movement desperate, raw, uncoordinated. The shadow lunged toward her, but she dodged with a speed that belied her exhaustion. The screen flickered violently, the camera struggling to capture the chaos. Vincent's heart pounded, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. He could see her fight not just for herself, but for the 3 fragile lives in her arms. A loud crash rang out. A vase, a chair, something heavy, and the figure stumbled, regaining balance instantly, relentless. Aria ducked behind a wall, babies pressed to her chest, eyes wide and terrified, calculating her next move with precise desperation. Vincent could feel every second stretching into eternity. He felt the weight of all his failures, all the times he had misjudged her, every lie he had ever believed about her betrayal. The figure advanced again, hand reaching, shadow swallowing the room. Aria whispered something, perhaps a name, perhaps a plea. The camera couldn't capture the sound, but her lips moved, frantic, urgent. Vincent's chest heaved. His entire life had led to this moment, watching her in danger, unable to intervene, forced to rely on the feed to tell him the truth. The figure's shadow loomed closer, a menacing silhouette. The babies stirred, tiny hands reaching toward Aria's neck, gripping at her clothing, the bond between them undeniable and raw. Aria spun, pivoting with the babies, pressing herself into a corner. Her face was a mask of exhaustion, fear, and unrelenting determination. Vincent's eyes narrowed. He could see the terror in her movements, the calculated chaos, the instinct that had kept them alive all this time. And then, as if fate itself demanded suspense, the feed cut to black. No sound, no image, just darkness. Vincent recoiled from the console, sweat beading on his forehead, every nerve ending screaming. He sat back, fists still clenched, heart pounding, mind racing. He didn't need to see the rest to know. Something had happened. Something dangerous. Something that could destroy everything he loved. He reached for his phone, dialing the number he hadn't called in months, hesitating only a heartbeat before redialing. But no one answered. The darkness on the screen lingered, oppressive, as if mocking him. Vincent realized with a sinking certainty that the nightmare was only beginning. The shadows in the safe house had won this round, but he would be there next time. He had no choice. And with that, he swore a silent, brutal oath. Whoever had dared touch Aria or his children would pay. Vincent didn't pause. The moment the feed went black, the room seemed to shrink around him, shadows crawling along the walls as though mocking his helplessness. His fingers clenched the edge of the desk, nails biting into his palms, and before reason could whisper caution, he was out the office door, boots striking the marble with a fury that matched the storm in his chest. Every muscle in his body screamed urgency. His mind replayed Aria's terrified gaze, the way she had clutched the babies as if she were the only thing holding their fragile lives together. He didn't think. He drove, careening through the city streets, the roar of the engine matching the drum beat in his ears. Traffic blurred past like streaks of gray and red, but he barely noticed. His vision narrowed, tunnel-focused on the safe house, on the place where everything he feared and everything he loved collided. Memories of her disappearance assaulted him. A year ago, she had vanished without a word, without a trace. His rage at that abandonment had been all-consuming, convincing him that she had chosen a world without him, that she had willingly cut their connection. But now the footage tore that assumption apart, leaving him raw, stripped of false certainty. The babies, their tiny forms so like him, were proof of a reality he had refused to acknowledge, proof of a life forged in secrecy, in terror, in solitude, and he hadn't been there. Guilt gnawed at his gut, sharper than any blade he'd faced in his career. He slammed his hands against the steering wheel, flexing his fingers, knuckles white, trying to shake the mix of fury and fear threatening to consume him. Every turn, every red light, every second spent inching toward the safe house stretched the drive into eternity. Vincent's mind replayed the footage repeatedly. Aria's trembling hands, the careful way she adjusted the infants against her chest, the shadow looming behind her, moving silently, predatorily. Each frame etched itself into his memory, forcing him to relive her terror as if it were his own. His breathing was ragged as he skidded to a halt outside the safe house, tires screeching against the asphalt. Gun in hand, instincts razor sharp, he assessed the scene with the precision of a man trained to survive violence. The door was cracked open. It hadn't been earlier when he had scoped the perimeter. That small detail, this subtle shift, sent a shiver down his spine. The air outside the house was heavy, thick with anticipation. Night winds whispered through the nearby trees, stirring leaves with a hiss that sounded like quiet threats. Vincent approached silently, every step measured, ears straining for the faintest sound. He pushed the door gently with the muzzle of his gun raised, stepping inside. The interior smelled faintly of dust, decay, and fear. Everything was wrong. The air stagnant, too still, too clean, as though someone had staged it for a purpose. He called her name, voice low, controlled but taut with urgency. Aria. His echo returned from the walls, mocking him with emptiness. The silence that followed was suffocating, pressing against his chest, demanding that he respond, act, intervene. A faint creak made him freeze. A floorboard somewhere upstairs betrayed movement. Vincent's body tensed, every sense screaming. He swept the room with the gun, checking corners, shadows, and furniture, anticipating a trap he didn't yet see. Then a soft, desperate cry broke through the silence, high-pitched and vulnerable. It was a sound that pierced him, forced him to accelerate his pace toward the living room. the sound of one of the babies, weak and insistent, a tether pulling him forward through fear and rage alike. He rounded the hallway, eyes scanning for any hint of her presence. Furniture appeared displaced, slight scuff marks on the floor, a chair tilted as if hastily abandoned. His pulse surged. Someone had been here, moving with purpose. The living room loomed ahead, shadows stretching across the worn rug, across the overturned table, across the furniture that bore subtle signs of struggle. Vincent's instinct screamed. This wasn't random. Someone had been searching for her, for the babies, for him. And then his eyes caught it. A single glove on the floor, black leather, worn but precise, lying in a pool of faint moonlight streaming through the window. His stomach dropped. The crest on it, a mark he knew all too well. A rival family he had once thought eradicated years ago. Vincent froze, gun trembling in his grip. Every training session, every kill, every encounter with enemies who underestimated him flashed through his mind. Yet here it was, proof that danger had infiltrated a place he had once considered secure. A soft scraping sound made him pivot. Nothing. His instinct screamed at him to stay alert, to assume the worst. His grip on the gun tightened until his knuckles ached. The glove shifted slightly as a draft passed through the broken window. Or was it movement? Vincent couldn't tell. Shadows lengthened unnaturally across the walls. He forced himself to breathe, controlled, tactical. But the tension gnawed at him. Footsteps? A whisper? Something in the distance, outside the immediate room? He strained to hear. The air was heavy with anticipation, a waiting predator, and he knew, with every fiber of his being, that time was slipping away. Vincent swept the room again, sweeping corners and behind furniture. The fireplace showed faint scorch marks, as if someone had leaned there, assessing the room. A faint scent of leather and gun oil lingered. Someone had been here, prepared for a fight, aware of his potential return. He moved closer to the glove, every step deliberate. Adrenaline surged, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. His eyes scanned the room for other signs, small things, footprints, scratches, disturbances in the dust, subtle but telling. Then a creak behind him. His gun swung toward the sound, a heartbeat too late. Nothing. Silence. A setup? A trap? Vincent couldn't be certain. His every sense was screaming at him. They were here, watching, waiting. He knelt, inspecting the glove. The insignia was unmistakable, the rival family he had believed crushed long ago. Every instinct told him this was a warning, a taunt. A single item left deliberately to unsettle him. A rustle near the staircase made him spin, gun ready. Shadow shifted. Nothing. A fleeting glimpse, gone in an instant. He cursed under his breath, recognizing the style. Calculated intimidation, psychological warfare. He edged toward the living room, slow, careful, aware that at any second the intruder could emerge from the darkness. Each heartbeat was a countdown, a reminder that this was no ordinary confrontation. His eyes caught the faint movement of a curtain. Was it wind, or was it someone stalking him, observing every motion? He stepped closer, every nerve taut, every sense heightened. The soft cry came again, from deeper in the room. The babies calling out. He followed the sound, heart hammering. Every shadow could conceal threat or salvation. A chair tipped over silently behind him. He pivoted, gun sweeping, ready for attack. Nothing. The air felt electric, charged, waiting to explode. The smell of smoke, faint but distinct, reached him. Someone had been here with intent. The subtle signs multiplied. Traces of powder, a scuff, faint scratches on the walls. His mind raced, connecting the dots. The glove was a message. Someone had tracked Aria, tracked him, calculated his response. And they were bold enough to strike under his nose. He paused, listening. A window rattled slightly. Wind or deliberate motion. Every shadow became a potential threat. Every sound a predator stalking him. Vincent pressed forward, inching toward the center of the living room. His eyes darted to the corners under the table behind the sofa. Nothing seemed out of place, yet everything screamed danger. A faint whisper of movement from the far corner. He froze. The hairs on the back of his neck stood. Someone, or something, was here. His gun remained steady, but sweat ran down his temple, the tension unbearable. He could feel the trap tightening around them. A slight metallic click echoed softly. Vincent's eyes snapped to it. Nothing visible. Every instinct screamed he was not alone. The babies cried again, a soft, urgent sound that made him quicken his pace. He followed it, moving like a shadow himself, silent, deliberate, deadly. A door creaked in the distance, slow and deliberate. He pivoted, gun aimed, ready to face whoever dared cross him. The glove on the floor seemed almost symbolic now, a warning, a challenge, a prelude to what was coming. Vincent realized with cold clarity, someone had anticipated his every move, every thought, every instinct. The soft cries of the babies pulled him forward, closer, yet every step felt like walking into a trap. The air felt charged with threat, heavy with anticipation, every shadow potentially hiding a weapon, a predator, or betrayal. Vincent's jaw tightened. His eyes swept the room one last time before moving toward the source of the cries. Every muscle was coiled, every sense was sharpened. Then, from the corner of his eye, a shadow moved unnaturally, deliberate. He turned sharply, gun ready. Nothing. A trick of the light? Or was it a warning that someone was watching? He approached the living room fully now, every step measured, calculating, anticipating confrontation. A soft shuffle. Too quiet for a normal intruder. Someone moved with deliberate stealth, trained, precise. The glove seemed to pulse with menace in his mind, a signal that danger was present, that the rival family he had thought destroyed had returned. His eyes darted again, scanning for any anomaly, a footprint, a misplaced object, a flicker of movement. Another soft creak. He pivoted. Nothing. Yet he felt them, always felt them. The baby's cries intensified, small, fragile voices cutting through the tension, driving him forward. He moved toward the center of the room, heart racing, every instinct screaming that the intruder was closer than he dared imagine. The shadow shifted again, subtle, just beyond perception, but unmistakable. Someone was there. Vincent swallowed, jaw tight. The danger wasn't random. It was personal, precise, calculated. Every minute stretched, every second a potential trap, every heartbeat a countdown. He knew with certainty that whoever had left the glove had intended him to find it, intended him to react. The atmosphere thickened. Silence pressed against him like a living thing, threatening to smother, to alert, to trap. He could hear the faintest shuffle near the fireplace, a draft whispered through the broken window, or movement. He crouched, careful, anticipating, ready to strike. Every sense sharpened, every shadow a possible threat. He moved slowly toward the sound of the cries, toward the living room, toward the truth hidden in the darkness. The glove lay in the center of the floor, ominous, symbolic, warning. Vincent's grip tightened on his weapon. The air vibrated with unspoken threats. Every instinct screamed. He was being tested, watched, manipulated. And then, in the silence, the softest click echoed, a prelude to what was waiting. His pulse surged. He stepped forward. The rival family's presence was undeniable. Every shadow now carried menace. Every movement could be fatal. The glove's insignia marked the beginning of the confrontation he had been running toward unknowingly for months. Vincent's jaw tightened as he advanced. The babies cried again, weak, urgent, fragile. He followed the sound, fully aware that danger lurked, invisible but lethal. Every shadow seemed alive, waiting. The tension coiled around him like a predator, ready to strike. Vincent prepared for whatever lay ahead, knowing that the glove was only the start of the battle. The room seemed to close in, the darkness hiding threats too subtle to name. Every heartbeat was a countdown, every breath anticipation. The faint rustle of movement signaled that the rival family had returned. Vincent knew the night had only begun. The glove, the cries, the shadows, all signs that the war for Aria and the babies was about to escalate. He pressed forward, every nerve screaming alert, every step a silent promise of vengeance. And then he saw it, just a hint, just enough to know, the presence of someone who shouldn't be there. Vincent's eyes locked on the corner of the living room where movement had barely registered, shadows hiding shapes from casual notice. There, huddled in a small, protective cluster, was Aria. Her body curled tightly around the triplets, every muscle taut with tension, every breath shallow and fast. The sight froze him, his gun lowering almost without thought, replaced by a weight heavier than steel pressing on his chest. Each second stretched, the silence of the house magnifying the faint whimpers of the babies, the slight tremble of her fingers as she adjusted the fragile forms against her. His pulse thundered in his ears, every heartbeat screaming that this was real, that she had survived, but at what cost? The glow of the moonlight cutting through the blinds illuminated her face, and Vincent could see every line etched by fear, every shadow of sleepless nights, every mark left by the hidden battles she had fought alone. She had endured horrors silently, carrying secrets heavier than most men could comprehend, yet here she was, a fragile fortress holding the most precious lives in his world. As he moved closer, careful, silent, his boots whispering against the floor, he felt a surge of guilt so sharp it burned his lungs. He had abandoned her in thought, in assumption, believing lies, letting anger blind him to the truth. Now the reality sprawled before him, undeniable and cruel. Aria's head lifted slightly, her silver-gray eyes locking onto his, and in that instant, every pretense, every hardened layer he had built over years, crumbled. Relief mingled with fear, longing intertwined with shame, raw emotion that he could neither name nor contain. She whispered his name, a fragile, trembling sound that seemed to anchor him in reality, and yet shatter every notion he had held of control. Vincent sank to one knee, gun lowering further, heart hammering, unsure if he could trust his own voice not to betray him in the rush of emotion. The babies stirred, small arms stretching toward him, their gazes holding him like a mirror, reflecting the truth he had denied for too long. These were his children, and Aria had carried this burden alone, unseen, unsupported, for a year. He swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to protect, to hold, to destroy anyone who had dared touch them, and yet the silence held a sinister warning that danger lingered. Aria tried to speak, her lips moving with words choked by exhaustion, voice shaking, every syllable a confession carved out of pain and fear. She recounted fragmented memories of threats, of whispers that Vincent himself would die if she stayed, threats originating from within the very circle he had trusted, enemies hiding behind masks of loyalty. Vincent's gut twisted, rage coiling around sorrow, betrayal piercing deeper than any knife or bullet. The thought that someone inside his own empire had endangered her, and the children fueled a fury that made his blood roar in his ears. He drew in a slow, deliberate breath, forcing his mind to calculate, to assess, yet the instinct to sweep her into his arms and never let go overpowered caution. He lowered himself fully beside her, careful not to startle, not to break the fragile trust she offered with her trembling presence. The triplets fussed, tiny hands brushing against his arm, their soft cries a reminder of the stakes, of the lives that depended entirely on their survival. Aria's eyes met his again, pleading, frightened, yet resolute, and Vincent could see every sleepless night, every hidden scar, every moment she had fought alone to keep them alive. He reached out slowly, voice low, almost inaudible, his words breaking through the tension. "It's me. I'm here. You're safe now." She exhaled shakily, a whisper of relief passing through her lips, but it was fleeting, a fragile ember against the storm he knew awaited them. The room's shadows seemed to pulse with unseen movement, and Vincent's instincts screamed that the danger from before had not vanished, that the intruder's presence lingered, watching, waiting for a moment to strike. He lifted a hand to gently brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch steady but trembling, anchoring them both in a fleeting moment of fragile intimacy. The babies stirred again, soft murmurs and hiccups, small reminders of life's fragility in a house that had been a battlefield without their knowledge. Vincent's eyes swept the perimeter of the room, the faintest creak, a subtle shadow or shifting curtain signaling that the threat had not left, that someone, maybe several, was still out there, calculating, observing. Aria's lips moved, attempting explanation, her voice wavering, trembling under the weight of everything she had endured. She spoke of threats intercepted, messages lost, people in his own network turning against them, betrayal veiled in loyalty that had been anything but. Vincent's stomach churned, rage intertwining with helplessness, but he forced himself to stay present, to listen, to hold the fragile form of the woman who had sacrificed so much. He drew her closer, arms wrapping around her, as though he could shield her with mere proximity, the babies cradled safely against their bodies. Her breath hitched, tiny hiccups from the infants echoing softly, each one a delicate heartbeat that reminded him of what was at stake. And then, the faintest sound, outside, distant, deliberate, reached their ears, slicing through the temporary sanctuary he had created with his presence. Aria stiffened, her head lifting slightly, eyes wide, scanning the room as if she could see the threat manifesting in shadows. Vincent's grip tightened around her, instincts flaring, muscles coiling like spring-loaded steel. His every sense heightened, ears straining for the faintest footstep, eyes scanning every shadow, calculating angles, escape routes, and threats. The soft cries of the babies mingled with the rustle of air, creating a tension so thick it seemed almost tangible, pressing against their skin. Aria whispered again, words catching in her throat, voice trembling, the syllables laden with dread and urgency. "Vincent, they found us again." Every muscle in his body went rigid, heart hammering in rhythm with his pulse, every instinct screaming that the danger was no longer distant but imminent, closing in with precision and intent. He pulled back slightly, eyes narrowing, assessing the room, mapping threats, calculating responses, all while keeping her and the infants pressed to him, a living shield against the unknown predator. The shadows seemed to dance, stretch, and twist in the corners, carrying menace and uncertainty. Vincent's jaw clenched, teeth grinding almost audibly as he prepared for the confrontation he had only glimpsed through the baby's cries and the warning in her voice. Every whisper of movement, every breath of air felt like a countdown. The knowledge that someone had tracked them, found them despite months of hiding, struck him with a force that made his blood boil and his mind sharpen simultaneously. Aria clutched him tighter, small hands gripping his jacket, her eyes scanning, every flicker of her gaze confirming the terror they faced together. Vincent whispered reassurances, promises, threats to anyone who dared, words he didn't finish aloud, knowing that action would speak louder than any vow. The air was thick, charged with anticipation, and the faintest sounds from outside, the scrape of a branch, the creak of floorboards, made every hair on his body stand at attention. The babies stirred again, sensing tension, their tiny movements almost prescient in recognizing danger. Vincent moved with calculated precision, positioning himself between them and the unseen threat, eyes darting, muscles coiled, senses flaring. Aria's whisper repeated, quieter this time, almost a prayer. "They found us again." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and Vincent knew that nothing in his world would ever be the same. The moment froze, every heartbeat amplified, every shadow loaded with peril, every breath a countdown to what would come next. Nothing else existed but the corner, Aria, the triplets, and the encroaching menace whose presence was undeniable, whose intentions were lethal, whose arrival was imminent. He drew a long, controlled breath, preparing for what he knew was coming, and readying himself to defend them against a danger that had found them despite all precautions, all planning, all vigilance. Every sense screamed at him. The enemy had breached the last line, and the fight for their survival was about to begin in earnest. Vincent didn't hesitate. The moment Aria whispered the words that sent ice through his veins, "They found us again," he acted with the precision of a predator, long trained in survival. He swept an arm under her, lifting her carefully, almost reverently, ensuring the triplets remained pressed securely against her chest. Their tiny bodies stirred and whimpered, a sound that pierced his chest, sharpening his focus rather than distracting him. Each soft cry was a reminder of what was at stake, of the lives in his hands, fragile and irreplaceable. The back room loomed ahead, dimly lit but safer than the central living space, and he moved toward it with quiet urgency, every footstep calculated, every sense alert to the slightest anomaly in the house that had once been a fortress but now felt violated. Shadows moved across the windows outside, deliberate, coordinated, a dance of menace confirming that Aria's fears were far from imagination. They weren't running from him. They were being hunted. Vincent's teeth clenched. He could smell danger in the air, a metallic tang mixing with the faint scent of dust and worn leather. Every instinct screamed at him, prepare, protect, anticipate. Aria's fingers dug into his jacket, nails pressing lightly, small but firm, a silent plea for safety that he couldn't fail. He set her down gently against a wall, still holding the babies close, and scanned the room with a gaze so sharp it could cut glass. The moonlight traced sharp angles revealing the subtle movements outside, the shadows of assailants trained to strike, to exploit hesitation. Aria's voice broke, trembling as it did, a fragile thread carrying her confessions. The threats she had received, the days she had lived in constant fear, the nights she had almost lost one of the babies before birth, alone. Vincent's jaw tightened with rage. She had suffered in silence, had endured unimaginable stress, all while he blamed her absence on imagined betrayal. She recounted the countless attempts to contact him, all intercepted, messages never reaching his hands, phone calls mysteriously silenced, letters stolen or destroyed. Someone had orchestrated their isolation meticulously, turning his anger into distance, hiding the truth in plain sight. Vincent's mind raced, processing the calculated cruelty while his eyes never left the shadows moving with lethal precision outside the windows. He handed Aria his gun, steadying her hands against it, instructing her in a low, firm voice to hold it steady, to remain ready, to trust in her strength. The babies stirred again, small murmurs that tugged at his heart, and he wrapped a protective arm around both mother and children, the other hand ready at the door. Footsteps echoed outside, deliberate, heavy but controlled, each one a harbinger of violence. The boards creaked underfoot, a rhythmic warning that danger was closing in. Vincent stepped toward the front door, muscles coiled, senses flaring, his every movement precise, practiced, a blend of instinct and calculated anticipation. He caught the glint of metal outside the window, guns, knives, perhaps both, and his pulse quickened. The faint reflection of moonlight glimmered against cold steel, promising bloodshed. He exhaled slowly, steadying his mind while every fiber of his body screamed for action. Then it happened. A deafening crack split the night air, a bullet ripping through the wood mere inches from his head. Splinters flew, embedding themselves in the doorframe, dust and splinters showering the floor. The sound reverberated through the walls, shaking the fragile sanctuary he had tried to create. Vincent's gaze snapped to the source, every muscle coiling, every sense screaming danger, urgency, survival. He pressed Aria and the babies flat against the wall, instinctively shielding them as another round struck the same door, thudding against the wood with lethal intent. Sweat pricked at his temple, but his grip on the weapon remained unshakable. Each heartbeat was a countdown, each breath a measure of how long they could survive in this moment. The shadows outside shifted again, coordinating, tactical, a methodical approach to destruction. Vincent's eyes scanned for an escape route, for a vantage point, for any opportunity to turn defense into offense. He noted the floorboards, the walls, the furniture, every detail in preparation for what would come next. Aria's whisper came again, trembling but urgent. "Vincent, do something." He pressed a finger to her lips, silencing her, knowing that panic could be fatal, that their survival depended on controlled precision. He pivoted slightly, peering through the small crack in the door, spotting the silhouette of a figure crouched low, moving with lethal intention. Another figure joined, their presence coordinated, silent yet threatening. Vincent's mind raced, calculating trajectories, exit points, potential traps. He could hear their measured breathing, faint but unmistakable, confirming that trained hands intended harm. The babies squirmed slightly, and he adjusted them instinctively, murmuring reassurance while his eyes never left the door. The scent of gunpowder faintly reached him, a warning that the next shot could come at any moment. His finger hovered over the trigger, ready to protect, ready to strike first if necessary. Each creak of the floor, each whisper of wind through broken blinds, each shadow shifting outside increased the tension in the room, compressing time into a slow, nerve-wracking crawl. Vincent's jaw clenched as he considered the stakes. The lives of the triplets, the safety of Aria, and the survival of their fragile unit depended entirely on his decisions in the next few seconds. Another flash of movement, a figure darting across the window's reflection, set his instincts ablaze. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, only prepared, coiled like a spring, ready to respond with lethal precision. The bullets had stopped momentarily, but Vincent knew it was a calculated pause, a momentary lull designed to lure him into recklessness. He shifted slightly, guiding Aria toward a safer corner, still shielding the babies, his weapon ready to respond. The air seemed to thrum with tension, the faintest rustle of clothing or the brushing of leaves outside amplified into imminent threat. Every sound, every shadow was a potential attack vector, a test of his reflexes, his ability to protect the people who mattered most. He took a slow breath, centering himself, eyes narrowing as he plotted the next move. The intruder's intention was clear: to destabilize, to threaten, to force him into a mistake. Vincent would not comply. His instincts screamed, and he acted purely on them, the years of experience guiding his body with lethal precision. A sudden scraping sound at the back of the porch made him pivot, gun raising just in time to catch a flicker of movement. Another bullet struck the floorboards near his feet, shrapnel scattering across the room. He pressed Aria closer, murmuring reassurances, his body shielding them like a living wall. The enemies were closing, moving with silent synchronization, each step a threat, each breath calculated. Vincent's gaze flicked toward the side window, noting the potential angles of attack, the shadows moving in practiced patterns. He whispered a low command, instructing Aria on subtle movements, ensuring they remained concealed yet prepared. The babies stirred, sensing the tension, tiny whimpers rising. Vincent adjusted his hold, one arm around them, eyes sharp, reflexes honed. Another scraping sound, closer, more deliberate. His pulse surged, adrenaline fueling the sharp clarity of every thought. Then another gunshot cracked the air, closer this time, slicing through the wooden threshold at lethal speed. Splinters flew, a near miss that would have ended everything had his reflexes faltered for an instant. Vincent's breathing was controlled, steady, even as his heart raced. He pressed Aria and the triplets tighter, eyes scanning, calculating angles, waiting for the next move, anticipating every possibility. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of imminent danger, shadows lengthening, echoing the threat that had found them despite months of secrecy. Another subtle movement at the edge of the window reflection caught his eye. Another intruder, another potential threat. Vincent's instincts kicked into overdrive, muscles coiled, mind calculating lethal responses. The tension was almost unbearable, a living entity pressing against his senses. Every sound became amplified, the faintest rustle, a soft breath, a creak in the boards, each one signaling the presence of danger, the encroachment of enemies. And then, without warning, the front door shuddered violently under the force of a new shot, wood splintering, a bullet ripping through inches from his head. The room erupted in tense energy, his body snapping into action, muscles coiled, gun raised, every sense hyper-aware. Vincent's eyes scanned rapidly for the intruder, every shadow, every reflection, every subtle hint of movement. Aria's grip tightened on him, the triplets pressed against her, their fragile bodies shaking with a mixture of fear and instinctive awareness of danger. The night had become a battlefield, the living room a cage where danger stalked invisibly. Yet Vincent remained calm in his controlled fury, prepared to strike, to protect, to destroy any threat before it could harm them. Every fiber of his being screamed readiness. The enemy had made their move, and the fight for their lives had only just begun. Vincent didn't have time to hesitate. The instant the bullet shattered the quiet, tearing inches from his head, the world outside exploded into chaos. Through the shattered windows, he saw them. Armed men, shadows moving with lethal intent, guns raised, trained and precise, descending on the property as if drawn by the scent of blood. The night air erupted with the sharp crack of gunfire, metal against metal, screams swallowed by distance, and the stench of gunpowder that made his stomach twist. Vincent returned fire instantly, each shot calculated, precise, almost surgical in its execution. His movements were fluid, a deadly dance learned through years of survival, each bullet finding its mark with brutal efficiency. His heart pounded, blood racing through his veins, adrenaline sharpening his senses beyond human limits. He could hear the subtle shifts in weight, the quietest footfalls, the faintest rustle of clothing betraying movement. The attackers weren't reckless. They were coordinated, moving like a single organism with one purpose: extinguish his bloodline, erase his family. Vincent's eyes flicked to the back room where Aria rocked the babies, her arms trembling as she fought to remain calm. Their cries pierced the cacophony of gunfire, small, vulnerable sounds that hammered at his soul. Every flash, every muzzle flare reminded him why she had left, why she had thought staying with him would only bring danger and death to her and the children. But now, seeing him fight for them, seeing him protect them with his life, her beliefs about him twisted, shattered, and reformed into awe, fear, and renewed hope. A bullet smashed against the wall behind her, splintering wood, and she flinched but held the babies tighter, whispering soft, almost instinctive words of reassurance. A prayer, a vow that she would not let them fall. Vincent's gun barked again, echoes bouncing off the trees, the fences, the perimeter of the yard. Every shot was deliberate, measured, hunting each intruder as if he were not defending himself, but reclaiming a throne, asserting dominance over anyone who dared challenge him. Shadows moved with unnatural coordination, flanking each other, testing, probing, trying to find a weakness in his defense. Vincent anticipated each maneuver, each trajectory, every potential angle of attack, responding before the threat fully materialized. His boots pounded against the hardwood floors as he advanced toward the back door, moving with lethal intent. The air inside the house was heavy, thick with smoke and the smell of burnt powder. Aria's eyes met his across the room for a split second. Fear mingled with relief, and in that instant he saw the trust she placed in him, fragile yet unbroken. Another intruder attempted to breach the side entrance, and Vincent's bullets found him before he could fully emerge, collapsing him silently into the darkness. The babies stirred, small whimpers cutting through the chaos, and Vincent's gaze softened for the briefest heartbeat. He scanned the yard, noting every detail. The overturned garbage cans, the broken fence, footprints that betrayed movement, and each small clue told him exactly how to counterattack. Aria whispered his name, trembling, holding the babies closer as if her life depended entirely on them surviving, and in many ways, it did. A shot rang out from the porch, ricocheting off a metal railing, close enough to singe his sleeve. Vincent pivoted. Fire returned instantly, his breath controlled, his focus razor-sharp. The intruders had underestimated him, their training inadequate to counter his experience, and one by one, they began to fall under his relentless onslaught. The final attacker lunged, desperate, reckless, and Vincent met him with a precision that left no room for error. He staggered back inside after the last man dropped, body slick with sweat and streaked with blood, both his own and remnants from the assailants. His chest heaved, lungs burning, heart pounding with a cocktail of fury, relief, and raw emotion. Aria remained frozen in the center of the room, her eyes wide, tears glistening on her lashes, the babies still pressed to her chest. She had watched him fight not for power, not for revenge, but for them, for the fragile, sacred lives he had vowed to protect. Vincent's gaze softened, and he pulled her close, his forehead pressing against hers, sharing breath and heartbeat, grounding each other amid the chaos. Their eyes locked, and he could see the storm of emotions raging inside her: fear, relief, admiration, love, and an unspoken apology for leaving without a word. The room was silent now, except for the soft cries of the babies, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Aria trembled against him, and for a moment the violent, chaotic world outside felt 1,000,000 miles away. He could feel the weight of every danger faced, every threat eliminated, every life spared by his own hands. The adrenaline still coursed through his veins, sharpening his senses, reminding him that danger was never far, that threats would always return. He held her tightly, brushing her hair back, feeling the warmth of her body, the softness of her hands, the gentle rise and fall of the babies' chests. Then she whispered words so fragile, so honest, so devastating in their simplicity that they cut through the remnants of fury and relief like a blade. "I still love you." Vincent froze, the world stopping around him for a heartbeat, the weight of those words shattering every wall he had built, every anger he had nurtured, every doubt he had carried. The realization struck him with the force of a thunderclap. Love had endured, despite lies, despite pain, despite time and distance. He stared at her, mind reeling, heart thundering in his chest, knowing that the battles fought, the bullets fired, the enemies vanquished outside, had all led to this single, perfect moment of truth. And yet, even in the glow of revelation, Vincent remained alert, senses sharp, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a whisper of danger. The war was far from over, but in that instant, in that fragile, trembling embrace, he understood the true stakes. Nothing, not power, not empire, not bloodlines, mattered more than the woman in his arms and the children they shared. He held them together, grounding them, shielding them, promising silently that no harm would ever come without consequence. The house still smelled of gunpowder and fear, the floors splintered, the walls bearing scars of the violence that had erupted mere moments ago. Yet, amid the chaos, amid the blood and danger, there was a stillness, a fragile peace, centered on the raw honesty of Aria's confession and the shared heartbeat of their tiny, vulnerable family. The night outside remained unpredictable, shadows lurking beyond windows, but inside, in that room, Vincent knew he had reclaimed more than victory. He had reclaimed love, loyalty, and the promise of a future worth defending. And as he pressed his forehead to hers, breathing uneven, tasting both sweat and tears, the words lingered, fragile and powerful, echoing in his mind, a declaration he would never forget. "I still love you." 6. Vincent held Aria close, the soft cries of the triplets fading into the background as the weight of the night's violence gave way to something infinitely more personal, infinitely more consuming. His lips met hers, not in a tentative brush, not in a gentle acknowledgement, but with the force of years of longing, regret, and desperate need. Every buried memory, every moment of lost time, every lie and misjudgment they had both suffered, surged up and demanded release. The kiss was raw, urgent, a collision of passion and relief, a declaration that neither time nor circumstance could sever what had been theirs from the beginning. Aria responded instinctively, melting against him, her arms tightening around the babies who were pressed safely between them, the fragile warmth of life bridging the gap of lost years, creating a temporary fortress of family amid chaos. Her breath hitched against his chest, and in the pause between gasps, she whispered, "I want to come home." Not as a plea born of fear, not as a concession to danger, but as a confession of a longing she had carried in silence for far too long. Vincent pulled back slightly, brushing damp strands of hair from her face, his eyes scanning hers as if he could read every hidden truth, every secret regret, every unspoken promise she carried. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, over her trembling lips, and he whispered his own vow, not to words but to actions, to life and consequence. He promised protection the likes of which she had never known, a shield forged not only in muscle and firepower, but in unwavering loyalty. He promised truth, an honesty unflinching, even when it might burn them both, even when it might reveal betrayals that cut closer than any gunshot. He promised a future, not the hollow empire he had built for power alone, but something real, something human, something theirs. Yet even as warmth flowed between them, as the fragile glow of reunion softened the edges of terror, a simmering ember of anger glowed beneath Vincent's skin. He knew, instinctively, that this night's attack had not been random, that the infiltration, the bullets, the chaos had been guided by a hand closer than he wanted to believe. Someone from inside, someone he trusted implicitly, had betrayed him. Someone had tried to erase the bloodline he carried in his arms. The thought twisted his gut, sharp and unyielding, and he pressed a hand to his forehead, forcing himself to breathe, forcing himself to focus. Aria noticed the shift, her trust absolute, her forehead pressing to his, and he felt the weight of her belief, her fearlessness in placing herself and their children in his hands, and it scared him in its intensity. He couldn't falter. He couldn't let the betrayal he sensed ruin the fragile miracle of this reunion. Vincent's eyes darted around the room, noting the signs of the earlier skirmish, every splintered piece of furniture, every scorch mark, every lingering trace of smoke and gunpowder. Each detail confirmed his suspicion. The enemy had been deliberate, precise, informed. The thought of someone within his own men feeding them information, betraying him from within, sent a cold shiver down his spine. He tightened his grip on Aria, the baby's tiny heads resting against his chest, and swore silently that he would find the traitor, expose them, and make them pay for the audacity of endangering his family. Her hands clung to his arms as if she could anchor him to the present, and in that connection he drew both strength and clarity. Every heartbeat echoed like a drumbeat of war, and yet beneath the rage and calculation, a fragile human warmth persisted, a reminder of why he fought, why he loved, why nothing else truly mattered. The room remained quiet now, the danger temporarily paused, but Vincent's instincts told him the night was far from over. He felt the weight of every life that depended on him, Aria, the triplets, and the empire he had built, and knew that any lapse could be catastrophic. The sound of the wind outside whispered against the broken windows, a ghostly echo of the chaos that had erupted mere moments ago. But his focus was unyielding, centered entirely on the fragile family in his arms and the betrayal he suspected within his own ranks. His phone buzzed suddenly, vibrating against the nearby table, and the momentary intrusion of technology felt like a thunderclap in the quiet tension of the room. He pulled it up, eyes narrowing at the message that appeared on the screen. Simple words, but laden with threat and urgency. "Check your right-hand man." Vincent's chest tightened, a cold fury settling in his bones. The man he had trusted above all others, who had been with him through blood and fire, could be the source of this treachery, the one who had orchestrated the attacks, guided the enemy, and endangered his family. Aria sensed the shift in his demeanor, the tightening of his jaw, the dark storm swirling behind his eyes, and her grip on his arms became instinctively protective, a silent plea to hold on to control, to balance rage with reason. Vincent's mind raced, replaying every interaction, every command given, every strategic move made by his inner circle over the past months, searching for the faintest sign of duplicity he had overlooked. He visualized the safehouse, the infiltration, the glove on the floor, the trajectory of the bullets, the pattern of the attack. Every detail pointed toward one conclusion: betrayal from within. He could almost hear the whispers of conspirators, the subtle manipulations that had remained invisible until now, the lies that had allowed the enemy to penetrate his life so deeply. His fingers tightened around his phone, knuckles whitening as he prepared for what he would have to do next. Confrontation was inevitable, and the thought of it brought no fear, only precision, calculation, and the promise of uncompromising retribution. Aria's breathing was steady now, but he could feel the tension beneath her trust, the shared understanding that the calm was temporary, that danger still lurked beyond the walls of their fragile sanctuary. Vincent pressed a hand to her shoulder, grounding himself, grounding her, anchoring the moment even as storm clouds gathered. He glanced down at the babies, tiny lives dependent entirely on the outcome of the decisions he was about to make. Their innocence, their vulnerability intensified the urgency, magnifying every possible consequence of failure. He swore silently, a vow unbroken and unyielding, that he would not allow a single harm to touch them, that every threat would be neutralized, every enemy punished, every betrayal avenged. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, every sound amplified, the soft whimper of a baby, the faint creak of floorboards, the distant hum of a city unaware of the war unfolding in a private home. The words on the screen burned into his mind, "Check your right-hand man." And Vincent knew that the next steps would define not just the safety of his family, but the future of everything he had built. He inhaled deeply, centering himself, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down, but also the surge of clarity that accompanies decisive action. Every second counted. Every moment was an opportunity or a threat, and he was ready to face it without hesitation. The warmth of Aria's presence, the fragility of the triplets, and the knowledge of betrayal converged into a singular focus: uncover the traitor, protect the family, and ensure that love, despite everything, refused to die. And even as the shadows outside lingered, even as the night held its breath, Vincent knew what had to be done next, and that nothing, not blood, not fire, not treachery, would stop him from confronting the truth. Vincent's mind was a storm of controlled fury and razor-sharp calculation the moment he ended the call with Aria. The text he had received earlier, "Check your right-hand man," had ignited a fire he had barely contained until now, and there was no room for hesitation. Every instinct in his body screamed for immediate action. He summoned his most trusted guard, the one man whose loyalty had been tested in fire and blood, and instructed him to trace every movement of the right-hand man for the past year. Every detail, every shadow of suspicion that had gone unnoticed was now under scrutiny. The response came quickly. Hours of tracking and cross-referencing, all communication and physical movements revealed the truth in brutal clarity. His second-in-command, the man he had trusted above all others, the one who had stood beside him in victories and in wars, had been selling information to the enemy clan, feeding them details that had made Aria and the babies vulnerable. Worse, he had intercepted every attempt by Aria to reach Vincent. Calls, letters, messages, all gone unread, trapped, manipulated, and twisted to maintain the lie that she had abandoned him. Vincent's jaw clenched. Rage and betrayal coiled together, sharp and unrelenting, but he restrained it. He did not act out of emotion. He acted with precision, with the cold justice that defined him. He traced the paths, the patterns, the clandestine meetings, and every lead brought him to the warehouse where their brotherhood had once held meaning, where trust had once been sacred. The building loomed in the darkness, shadows stretching across its walls like fingers of the past reaching for him. Every step he took toward the entrance echoed in his mind. Betrayal, manipulation, the lives at stake, the empire threatened. The doors creaked as he entered, his boots silent on the concrete, senses alert. And there he stood, the man who had betrayed him, arrogance painted across his face, eyes gleaming with a mixture of defiance and malice. "You found me," the traitor said, a cruel smile curling on his lips. "I suppose it was only a matter of time." Vincent's gaze was unwavering, assessing every inch of him, every muscle, every subtle tell of guilt or preparation. "The babies," Vincent said, voice low, cold, precise. "What have you done?" The man laughed, a short, bitter sound that reverberated through the cavernous warehouse. "The babies were never meant to be born," he said, as if stating a fact, as if life and innocence were insignificant in his plan. Vincent's heart pounded, a surge of protective instinct colliding with the meticulous control he maintained over his empire. He didn't fire out of blind rage. He fired out of justice, each shot calculated, each movement deliberate, aimed to stop the traitor and reclaim what had been stolen. Bullets found their mark, and when the dust settled, the man lay defeated, his laughter extinguished, the weight of betrayal finally lifted from Vincent's shoulders. Vincent exhaled sharply, a mixture of relief and lingering tension coursing through him. He returned home under the cover of night, the cool air brushing against his face as he approached the familiar balcony. There, bathed in the pale glow of moonlight, stood Aria, holding one of the triplets, the child resting against her chest as if trusting the night itself to protect them. Her eyes caught his, soft and weary, glimmering with relief and the fragile hope that the nightmare had ended. Vincent's gaze softened momentarily, allowing himself the fleeting taste of calm, of reunion, of family. But then, as his eyes traveled downward, something caught his attention. A small detail, subtle but horrifying. On the baby's sock, a tiny tag bore a number etched in ink, unfamiliar and precise. His mind immediately connected it to a pattern, a code he had once glimpsed in intelligence reports, a mark associated only with one thing, a secret experiment orchestrated by the enemy clan, designed to manipulate, control, and exploit children like his own. The blood in his veins turned to ice. He moved closer, examining the other babies, each one bearing the same mark, the same number, the same horrifying indication of premeditated targeting. The reality hit him in a way that words could not capture. The triplets were not just random targets. They had been meticulously chosen, studied, and prepared for something far darker than he had imagined. The enemy's plan had extended beyond assassination or intimidation. They had sought to twist innocence, to claim power over life itself through these children. Vincent's grip tightened around Aria, pulling her closer, the babies safe against his chest, yet their vulnerability a knife to his gut. Every instinct screamed to protect, to destroy, to eradicate the threat before it could touch them again. But he knew calm precision was as deadly as anger. His empire, his mind, and his resolve were his weapons now. Aria pressed against him, sensing the gravity of his realization, feeling the weight of a war that had been waged in shadows, invisible until this moment. Vincent's thoughts raced, connecting dots, considering every contingency, planning every move with ruthless clarity. Every shadow outside the balcony, every rustle in the night could be the enemy making a next move. He realized they had been marked, monitored, manipulated, but they were not helpless, not while he stood alive, aware and prepared to retaliate. He kissed the top of Aria's head, a mixture of tenderness and steel, promising in that touch that nothing would ever take them again. The moonlight reflected off the baby's tiny face, innocence untouched, yet threatened, a reminder of why vengeance, strategy, and protection were non-negotiable. Vincent's eyes hardened, mind sharpened. He would not allow the enemy clan to succeed in twisting fate, to corrupt his bloodline, to claim what was his. Every shadow of the night was now a battlefield, every silent street a potential threat, and every movement in his empire would be a calculated strike against the one who dared to touch his family. He drew in a deep breath, centering himself, letting the weight of both grief and resolve settle into a cold determination. He would hunt them methodically, leave no stone unturned, no ally unchecked, no enemy unpunished. The air around him seemed charged, taut with the tension of impending war, yet beneath it, a fragile thread of human warmth persisted. Aria's trust, the baby's existence, the reclamation of what had been almost lost. The night stretched, quiet but pregnant with consequence, and Vincent knew that while the immediate threat had been neutralized, the true challenge had only begun. The enemy's reach had been long, their methods insidious, their intentions twisted, and yet he was ready. He would reclaim control, protect his family, and confront the darkness that had sought to claim the triplets before they could even breathe their first breaths. Every strategy, every ally, every memory of past battles flowed through him as he plotted the next moves, understanding that this fight was far from over, that survival meant vigilance, precision, and ruthless execution. He shifted his gaze to the balcony, to Aria and the babies, feeling both the fragility and the resilience of the life he had reclaimed. And in that moment he swore silently, unbreakably, that whatever the enemy had planned, whatever twisted designs they had set into motion, he would dismantle them piece by piece. The enemy clan had marked his children for something far darker than assassination, and Vincent Morelli would see to it that they would fail, that his bloodline, his family, his legacy would remain untouchable. The moonlight glinted off the inked numbers, a stark reminder of the stakes, the danger, and the unrelenting war ahead. And as he held Aria and the triplets close, the clarity was absolute. This night was not the end. It was the beginning of a calculated, inevitable reckoning. Wow, what a journey! If this story gripped you, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. I want to know how it made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a heart-woven tales story. Remember, every ending has a beginning, and the next story is just around the corner. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next tale.